Welcome to the Persist series, Discover E's monthly conversation series to help women in engineering and tech build community and thrive in their careers. On today's episode, we're chatting with Amy and Maritza, the gals behind Engineering Gals. Amy and Maritza founded Engineering Gals with the goal of providing accessible education, resources, and community for women in engineering. From an open access library of workshops, tools, and networking opportunities to funny and relatable memes, Amy and Maritza aim to support their growing community of women in their uniquely approachable and inclusive ways. I can't wait for you to meet the Engineering Gals themselves, Amy and Maritza. Amy Kaur is an entrepreneurial civil engineer. As a first-generation American and college graduate, she strives to amplify underrepresented voices in STEM through the Gals Chat podcast and live seminars for students and professionals. Maritza Bravo is a civil engineer with a specialty in construction management. She is passionate about empowering and inspiring women and has served as vice president and president of the Society of Women Engineers at her alma mater, California State University, Long Beach. Please join me in welcoming Amy and Maritza.
My name is Amy Kaur. I am a civil engineer and one of the co-founders of Engineering Gals. My journey started off when my parents pretty much immigrated from India when I was just 2 months old. And I grew up in Bakersfield with my parents and 3 younger sisters. So growing up, I would work on a lot of cars with my dad. He was a mechanic. So I kind of had a lot of hands-on experience. And that's kind of what led me to engineering. But it wasn't until my second year in university where I actually decided to become a nursing major. Before that, I was pretty much undecided. And that was mainly because I never really knew what engineering was growing up. Once I kind of figured out what I wanted to do and I realized that my passion was in engineering, kind of looking back to those memories of working on cars with my dad in the garage, that's when I started to do my undergrad in engineering at Cal State Long Beach. So when I got to university, I started noticing that there weren't that many girls in my classes, and just being an older sister, I really wanted that sisterhood in my life. So it was about my junior year in college when I met my co-founder Maritza and we started Engineering Gals.
My name is Maritza Bravo. I am a first-generation American. My parents migrated from South America. My mother's from El Salvador. My father's from Colombia. And I have a bachelor's of science in civil engineering from California State University, Long Beach. I am currently a full-time construction manager for one of the largest ports in the country. I am also the co-founder of Engineering Gals, a platform for women in engineering.
It was really funny when we met because we were in our geotech lab, and then we started studying in the library, and that was when we kind of started talking about the representation for women in engineering.
Yeah, exactly. I think one of my earliest memories when I walked into my engineering course was that it was like full of men. And I was like, where are the women in engineering? And through my academic years, it just felt lonely, as you mentioned before, Amy.
Yeah, and you grew up with sisters. I grew up with sisters. So I think we both were looking for that sisterhood in university. So because we didn't have it ourselves, we started creating that world online. And we started featuring ourselves. We actually started on YouTube, and then we started to realize that there were so many things that we couldn't do ourselves because we were just civil engineers. There are a lot of different topics in engineering, so we wanted to make sure that if we couldn't cover it, that we could bring people in to kind of talk about that. So that was featuring our coworkers, right? We started featuring our coworkers and they started doing day in the life takeovers.
We started off just pretty much highlighting ourselves, our experience, our career, but it soon after evolved to featuring other women because engineering is so broad. We have aerospace engineers, mechanical engineers, industrial engineers, and we really wanted to highlight and have that information available to the public through social media. I think just overall that representation in media is so important because as an undeclared student, my freshman year, my counselor actually encouraged me to look into engineering. And as a first generation American, I mean, no one in my family was an engineer and I had no idea what they did. So I actually YouTube what is engineering, and all of the videos, everyone who made videos about engineering, they were just, old white men. And I was like, I can't see myself in this career if there's no representation. The National Science Foundation actually reported that less than 22% of women actually earn engineering degrees. And to me, that was extremely shocking because growing up, I loved math. And I know other girls in my same grade loved math. So I really wanted to understand what happens throughout that transition from middle school to high school to universities, and why aren't there enough women in engineering?
And the thing that I really wanted to kind of talk about is how we recognize that, there's the representation, and then we started diving into educational webinars. So we hosted Civil Gals, Space Gals, resume career workshops, but then soon after we pretty much realized that there's an entire experience that isn't being highlighted by most engineering organizations out there. And that's why we wanted to be kind of different. And we started hosting Black women in STEM, Latinas in STEM, Asians in STEM, to really highlight, that minority experience of being a woman in engineering, but the intersectionalities within that. And after that, we also hosted our very first Men for Women in STEM. So we included men in the conversation on how they could be better allies and be part of the solution. And that was something that was really interesting as well, because research actually shows that when men are engaged in gender inclusivity programs, that the organization sees a 96% of benefit and change versus only 30% when only women are engaged in those conversations. So I think that was really important. And that really brought the community together online and in person when we would have in-person events. And now we know so many types of engineers, and I think it's created a better culture.
So overall, with the Engineering Gals platform, it was very important for us to highlight minority women in engineering because there are less than 12% of Latinas who earn an engineering degree, and it's less than 6% for Black women in engineering. So overall, when we're looking at those numbers, as a platform that we created, we really wanted to increase that percentage. And having that community of people that are just like you could encourage others to pursue engineering.
Yeah, I would say with mentorship, I had both good and bad experiences. I had really good mentors that, got me into engineering, got me my first internship in engineering. But I also had a professor who told me to drop calculus because I failed the first midterm. And I was like, maybe I should listen to the advisor. The professor's older, he's wiser, maybe he knows. And I was like, no, I know I could pass this class. This is the one class I need to transfer to Cal State Long Beach. And I just stayed in the class. I didn't drop it, and I ended up passing and became a civil engineer, literally. So sometimes you have to pick and choose the advice you get from your advisors, your professors, and you have to know what's best for you. And all the advice you get might not be good for you, at the end of the day. There's gonna be challenges, but I would just say, don't shy away from your passions just because you're not good at it in the beginning. I was never good at math growing up. I know a lot of people who say, if you're good at math, you should just be an engineer. I was the opposite. So I kind of had to really decide at one point in my life, am I going to let math stop me from pursuing my passion, or am I just going to do it? And that's what I did. I went to a lot of tutoring, and I think that was the one common misconception I found a lot was that you have to be really good at math to be an engineer. And you just have to be willing to learn. And I just practiced. And before I knew it, I ended up really liking math. And I got really good at it.
I think the problem that I faced during university was actually professors being sexist, and I think a lot of people don't speak about this. There is a huge turnover of females declaring engineering, and then somehow they just drop out of engineering. And I think in my personal experience, it has to do a lot with the professors, the resources that you have during your undergrad. I come from my family. It's like I have a lot of sisters. My mother's a feminist. So to me, it didn't really bother me. I just kind of brushed it off and continued. But I think it's extremely important to have those conversations that professors, when they're teaching, they not only have to be aware of their students, of who they are, and just not say sexist things in class, because that could be very unmotivating towards female students.
So one of the things we always ask or talk about is, what is STEM thriving? And for me, STEM thriving, it comes hand in hand with balance. And for some people, they think that balance is something that you achieve on a daily basis. You do a little bit of work and then you go for a run and you have like this perfect day. But I don't think so. And I think it's important to also take your personal life into account when we talk about STEM thriving. So a lot of people might need to take time off to get their EIT, or maybe travel the world. Maybe you have to take care of a loved one. Maybe you lost a loved one. Maybe you're starting a family or getting married. Like, those are all times in our lives when we are focused on something that's other than, engineering and work. So STEM thriving for me is recognizing that I'm going to have different phases in my life. I took a year off of work due to some personal life things. And for the beginning part of it, I was feeling really guilty, and I felt like I was falling behind and my peers were going to be all ahead of me. But the skills that I learned during my year off were insane, like public speaking, the podcast, hosting events, organizing events, networking. I think when I came back to work, I thought I was going to start or pick back up where I left off, but I ended up being a lot more self-assured and confident than I've ever been in my entire life.
What is STEM thriving to me? So I recently just had a baby and I was introduced to motherhood, and I definitely had to take some time away from my career. And I was okay with that because, as you said, we go through different phases in life. And for me, it was extremely important for me to be there with my baby to make sure that she was being fed correctly, that she was growing, and just being there with your child. To me, that was extremely important. I know there's other people that, maybe their career is number one, but STEM thriving to me is to make sure that all aspects in your life you're taking care of, to make sure that life is enjoyable.
I actually took a year off work and I started focusing more on engineering gals. And during that time was when we hosted a lot of these webinars. And I also started the podcast at that time. And the podcast was pretty much a way for me to interview other women and professionals in the engineering industry, the STEM field, that were doing unique things, but then also share resources for, career development, but then also personal development, like resources for if there was sexual assault happening in the workplace.
A lot of our community members reach out to us when it comes to sexual assault in the workplace. And I think it's a topic that a lot of people don't cover overall. But, as having a community and having those women on your side really helps the community members overcome any type of situation that they're in, or even provide them resources of if it's beneficial for them to report it to HR, or what other resources they have in order for them to feel safe in the workplace.
Yeah, so a lot of that information was shared on the podcast, along with how to avoid burnout, the burden of advocacy. Those are some topics that we've talked about. There's an entire range. We try to pretty much approach our engineers within the community from a 360 approach so that we recognize that there's multiple aspects that make them who they are in their lives. And when we do that, they're able to be better engineers in their career. So I think it's really important to have that 360 approach.
Yeah, I totally agree. Because as a person, you're not just an engineer. You could be an engineer. You could be an engineering influencer. You could also be a mother. You could have hobbies outside of your career. And that's what makes you a person. And that's what makes you happy and enjoy life overall. So back in 2016, when we started the Engineering Gals platform, we couldn't find any engineers really talking about their careers. We definitely did see beauty influencers. We also saw fashion influencers, but I thought it would be amazing to see engineers share their career and be an engineering influencer. So kind of our platform definitely, we created that space for women to share their careers and for them to kind of just share their careers and hopefully inspire others to do the same.
Yeah, so the STEM influencer was something that really didn't exist. I think there were maybe a few people doing it at that time, but it wasn't happening on the scale that it is today. By, encouraging the women that we would feature on our Instagram, we would tell them like, hey, like maybe you should talk about engineering on your page. So back in the day, in 2016, no one was actually saying that they were an engineer on their social media bio. Mm-hmm. They would just say, living life or whatever. But like now, all of the engineers we know, they actually say like, hey, I'm a civil engineer. I'm an aerospace engineer. I work at NASA. And there's an entire plethora of resources that they have and share on their social media platform. And with that, we've been able to see real life examples of people who are talking about, what they've learned in their career, how they got their internships and their full-time job after that. And then go ahead and see that representation on a more personal level. Mm-hmm.
And with our STEM influencers, they are breaking stereotypes. I know for a fact when I would Google engineers on Google Images, you'd see just men, quote unquote nerdy men, Now when you Google engineers, you see women engineers, you see women that, are into fashion and love makeup, and they're also engineers, and it doesn't make them less than just because you are into fashion or beauty.
Yeah, I think that was interesting because I didn't grow up caring about the tech industry at all. I grew up watching YouTube videos on how to apply my concealer and foundation and eyeshadow. So like just to see like there wasn't people like me in engineering was hard. And then the memes too, right?
Yes, memes, the engineering memes.
Yeah.
They're so mean.
I know.
Towards women. They're sexist. So we started creating our own memes on social media. And I think the power of memes when it goes to the Instagram platform, they're so powerful. I mean, your meme literally could go viral, and that's the message that you're portraying out there in the world. So I think content creators need to be more in tune with themselves and understand that the content that they're creating is impacting the world.
And I also think it's important for supervisors and companies to kind of evaluate the workplace and the work culture. That's when those other soft skills come in and really need to shine, because it's not just about math and solving problems. We need to be able to recognize the entire experience of being an engineer. And having that openness and creating that space, I think, is really important to recognize that you're not just an engineer that just works all the time, but you're a human being. So with the pandemic, I think a lot of people have been questioning their life and their careers, and it's normal to want to change or not work or do something different. So I think a lot of people think also that if you have passions outside of your job, especially outside of engineering, that it's going to distract you. But I feel like it does the exact opposite, at least for me. And with Engineering Gals, it's been able to give me the skills I've never really had before. But I really want to encourage people to go out there and follow their passions outside of engineering. And it's okay if you've never done that before. And it's something that's really rewarding and can give you a dynamic perspective that you might not have had before. And then you could bring those skills back into the workplace.
If someone is feeling stagnant in their career, it's most likely you're burnt out. You've been working for way too long and you need to rediscover yourself and go do things that make you happy and go and explore things that you've always wanted to do. And as you mentioned before, it's okay to take a break from this whole hustle culture. It is okay to do that and to come back. And when you do go out and do things that you enjoy, you'll come back refreshed with a fresh mind.
Passion has pretty much kind of motivated us to keep going. We're constantly learning to balance our entrepreneurship with our personal lives and our careers on a daily basis.
Our entrepreneur journey overall together, it started off as a hobby and then we established it as a business, and selling courses and creating a brand overall on social media is so important so that companies see the value of your social media influence online. And I think throughout the years, we have established that brand where companies do value our community and they do sponsor posts for our accounts. And overall, that's just the journey that we've been on. But it was extremely important for both of us to offer free resources for first generation college graduates, for those people just like us that might not have the financial resources to hire a mentor or pay for these educational webinars. So that's why our podcasts and all the resources that we have are free for our community. So you guys could find Engineering Gals at Engineering Gals in all our social media platforms, Instagram, YouTube, and also TikTok,
Twitter, and our website, engineeringgals.com. And then our podcast is called Gals Chat by Engineering Gals, and it's available on Apple, Spotify, anywhere you listen to podcasts. So yeah, reach out to us. We love connecting with people. We're always hosting in-person events, all these types of events on social media as well. So we'd love to hear from you.
Thanks. Thank you.
We're looking forward to getting to know Amy and Maritza a little better and continuing this conversation during the live Q&A session. So stay tuned and get ready with your questions.
Hello, everyone. I'm Carol Smith. Welcome to episode 3, Relatable Content and Reliable Community. I'm Carol Smith. I am an electrical engineer at UL, a global safety science company located just outside of Chicago, Illinois. And joining us today are Maritza Bravo and Amy Carr, Engineering Gals co-founders and very busy civil engineers with very full careers. Ladies, I'm going to ask each of you to introduce yourselves, starting with you, please, Maritza.
Hi, everybody. My name is Maritza Bravo. As Carol mentioned, I am working as a civil engineer construction manager for the Port of Long Beach. I'm also the co-founder of Engineering Gals. I graduated with a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering from California State University, Long Beach.
Thank you, Maritza. And Amy?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. My name is Amy Carr. I'm a civil engineer, and my focus within civil engineering is water resources. And I got my civil engineering degree from Cal State Long Beach as well.
Thank you. All right, let's get started with some questions. I would like each of you to talk about your own experiences, first generation women in engineering, and any advice that you would share with others that are navigating this space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can go ahead and start. So as first generation, throughout my experience, our parents came to the United States for us to have a better education, to have a better career. So that's something that my parents always instilled in me. So throughout my journey, I always tried my best to, get into those honors classes, to work hard in school, to pursue the American dream. That's something that my parents always wanted for themselves and for me. So navigating going towards high school and transitioning to university, it was extremely difficult for me because not only in the financial aspect, but also having mentors or even like college applications, I had to navigate that myself, either asking counselors for advice, asking my teachers for advice of like, how do I go about applying to universities? How do I apply to scholarships? And once I got into university, I always had a part-time job. Sometimes I would work 30 to 40 hours just because I had to pay, my expenses throughout college, and also just looking and navigating for scholarships and where do I apply to scholarships? How do we get that free money? So just as first generation, I believe that people should understand that, it is a very hard barrier for first generation students in the financial aspect, but also their family support. Sometimes the families might not understand how difficult and how busy you are during your undergrad, especially in engineering. You're focusing a lot in your studies, and sometimes family are just wondering where you're at when they're inviting you to family gatherings. And I think that was my experience during undergrad. And I think an advice that I would tell other students that are going through the same journey as I did is just to find those mentors, find that community, because it helped me so much to find those mentors in university, even in my internships, when my supervisor was extremely helpful and provided that letter of recommendation for my next internship, or, going into um, engineering organizations. That was a huge support for me when I was looking for internships, looking for a first job out of college. Also, a lot of first generation students, we don't have that professional network. You're going into this industry and you don't know anybody. So it's very important for you to network with engineering organizations, put yourself out there, and also create a professional brand online, because nowadays people will Google you, people will try to add you on LinkedIn, and you have to make sure to have that professional aspect online, and just keep on going. I know it's a hard road along as first generation, but it's well worth it.
Thanks. Do you have anything to add, Amy?
Yeah, I do. So my first generation experience was interesting because similar to Maritza, like my parents told me to work really, really hard. And I didn't really understand why until I had to apply to college and I looked at the requirements and I was like, oh, I didn't know I need to have really, really good grades to get into this UC. But it was something that I just kind of had to learn for myself because no one else in my family had gone to college, and so I spent majority of my time, focusing on, doing good in college and then getting my internships. I worked about 4 years throughout my undergrad and then graduated and then focused really, really hard on getting my full-time job. But I think something that I learned was, as a first generation, a college graduate in my family, was that, a lot of the times I had to work really, really hard because I didn't have a choice. I had to support myself financially, but recognizing that, oh, there's other things outside of my career. Like now that I do have the time, I can focus on other hobbies outside of, just engineering. So that I can know, like, so that I'm not only just focusing on my job and relying on my career for 100% fulfillment within my life. So I think I had to kind of retrain my mind to like get away from hustle culture and realize, okay, like why am I working so hard? What's a healthy balance for me today? It might not be the same from when I was in college and struggling so hard to, just make ends meet. Now it's like, okay, I have the money, I have the time, I have the resources. I actually do want more of a balance. And even though like the, overworking and hustle culture is glamorized, it's not like the healthiest option for me. So I my advice would be to, try to explore things outside of your career after you do graduate, after you do get that full-time job, because it could give you a little bit more, stress relief and some sort of fulfillment outside of your engineering job.
It almost sounds like your passion, your engineering gals, and what you're offering, some of that is fruit from your experiences as first generations, that recognizing that maybe other first generations wouldn't know to find mentors and reach out to other people to get the help to apply for college and be successful at university. So, all right, let's move on to the next question. We very much love that you talk a lot about intersectionality for women on your platform. And can you speak a little bit more about any recurring themes or similar experiences that you've either heard or shared during your podcast, or just within the community that you've created online?
I think the reoccurring things that our members experience would be just overall sexism in the industry overall, and also imposter syndrome. I think a lot of women in engineering and in STEM really talk openly about imposter syndrome, how they go into a workplace or even to a competition and they feel like they don't belong. They feel like in reality they shouldn't be there, right? So I think that's a reoccurring. I think on social media, a lot of people talk about it, and a lot of people are open about their experience and their thoughts going through that. But overall, yeah, that's one of the reoccurring theme that I run into when I talk to members of our community.
Amy, anything else to add?
Yeah, I noticed that a lot of the women I interview on the podcast are juggling multiple things like Maritza and I. So they're either founders of another company, they are, hosting yoga classes, or they have some sort of other passion in their life that is different from engineering. And a lot of them often feel like they need to fit in this box and feel a little like uncomfortable saying like, oh, I'm also really interested in the arts, but I'm also really interested in engineering. A lot of, I think, people just struggle and feel like if they're in engineering, then that should be their main focus. And an engineer looks like this, or an engineer's interest outside of engineering should also be something related to their career. But when it's not, and they don't see a lot of people like that represented, they feel like a little intimidated or shy to, really confidently display that on whether that's like their social media or in their lives or even talk about it at work. That's what I've noticed. And I think I similarly kind of feel that way too. But that's why I bring them on to the podcast to talk about, the multidimensionality of, you as an engineer and your interests outside of that, and how those skills can just be, as I mentioned in that video, was like those skills just end up being transferred back into your work and making you a better engineer. And an engineer doesn't have to fit into this like box of just being technical.
Yeah, that's a great perspective to gain earlier in your career. And I kind of laughed at, you made the comment about how many women won't even put in their social media posts that they're engineers. And I thought about that and how I would be asked, well, what do you do? And my response would be, I work at UL. It's almost as if I didn't want to say I was an engineer, because and this is, going 5-10 years back, but I didn't want to say I was an engineer because in my mind, engineers, it wasn't like saying you're a doctor or a lawyer. I didn't want people to think of me as an engineer, which is very bizarre. It's something that I should be proud of, right, ladies? So yeah, it just kind of made me laugh to myself when you said that. It's like, wow, that's It's not just me. All right. This one I think relates to something that I experienced myself, Amy, when you talked about not doing so well in calculus and someone advising you to just drop the class, maybe find another major. So how do you gauge when advice you're getting is biased and doesn't serve you well? How do you kind of filter out what's good and what should be dismissed as nonsense?
Yeah, so for me, even though I knew I was bad at math, I also knew my capabilities, right? And I think you have to be able to come to a place where you know your strengths of not like something that you've been not your strengths of like, oh, I've done this successfully before, but just knowing in your heart, can I do this successfully? Like, do I think I have it within me to do this, right? And I think it comes from a place of taking ownership of your own career and knowing that like no one is going to take your career as seriously in your life other than you. Even though you might have mentors who are giving you advice, they might think that it's good for you, but you are the only person who would know that. So, yeah, even though I knew that I was bad at math, I knew that I had the ability to put my mind to something and accomplish it and see it through. And I knew like I had the self-discipline to study and go to tutoring and just read, my lecture notes before I got to class. I knew I had the ability to do that, so I decided to follow, my own gut, my own intuition, and then I ended up being right. And I think that's what it goes back to is like knowing yourself, knowing what you're capable of and your potential. And if you feel like the person that's giving you advice is maybe not seeing that in you and that capability, then you have to show it to them sometimes and prove them wrong. And it did kind of fuel me. I was like, well, I'm not going to drop this class. Like, I'm going to prove you wrong, and that's what ended up happening. So I think, and then there's other times where like I did fail a math class and I was like, I know I'm going to fail because it's just not making sense to me. So, but I think the advice part is like you do have to pick and choose because there's going to be good advice and then there's going to be advice that isn't benefiting you or your career. And you have to decide that for yourself.
Maritza, how do you gauge what's good advice and what's maybe not so good advice?
Yeah, I think I completely agree with Amy overall. I think you just have to follow your intuition. At the end of the day, you know what's best for you. And even though someone might be, a lot more experienced than you are and they're giving you advice, you just have to choose what's best for you and you have to do whatever you want to do in life. Other people can't really dictate or give you advice of what you're passionate about or what you really want to do in life.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, we live with our decisions, the results of the choices that we make. We live with it. The people giving the advice do not.
Yes.
So, all right. What advice do you have for women who are trying to get more involved in conversations about representation in the workplace? Let's start with Maritza this time.
Mhm. Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, what advice do you have for women who are trying to become more oh no, I'm sorry. I totally misread that. Here's the real question. What advice do you have for women who are trying to get more men involved in conversations about representation in the workplace? And Amy gave a really interesting statistics about the impact of change when men are involved. I think 96% as opposed to 30%. So what advice would you have for that, Maritza?
I would say just to invite them. I think a lot of conversations or even events, they're only tailored to women. But if you actually you go on and invite the men to that conversation, a lot of them are very open to have these conversations because they also have a mother, a sister, a wife. They see that experience through women that they love in their life. So for them, I think sometimes, these conversations are only towards women, but in reality, you just have to invite the men. And a lot of men are open to have conversations. Based on our experience, we invited all the, STEM influencer men in our community, and we invited them to have a conversation about representation. And they were more than willing and open to have these conversations. And it was a very successful event. So yeah, that's what I would advise, invite them.
Invite them to participate.
Yes.
Anything else to add, Amy?
Yeah, if you're looking to get more involved in having conversations about representation for women in engineering, I think having some sort of social media presence does help, whether it's LinkedIn. There's a lot of, different events that happen where you could attend and then maybe get to know some of the coordinators and advisors. And then I like to just uh, message people on LinkedIn and say, hey, I saw that you hosted this event. I would love to get to know you better and about your journey. And then just kind of ask if there's any opportunities to maybe be involved in the future, if they're hosting any events coming up. So I think LinkedIn is a great resource. And then following engineering communities on social media is another way. We've invited other, people to come in and do takeovers, lives, like podcast interviews on specific topics that our guests want to highlight and kind of share with the community. So I think it's just mostly just, getting out there, seeing, which kind of organization is hosting events, reaching out to them and seeing how you can get involved. There's always something that you can do, whether it's on, Instagram or LinkedIn or Twitter. There's a lot of Twitter talking spaces now where I've seen people getting involved. So that's like another space where you could also get involved.
All right. Do you agree when using, let me be careful reading it this time. Do you agree with using the term imposter syndrome when it could be described as community that is unwelcoming and dismissive of women? Because there's a difference when the community is not good or when it's just you not having the confidence. So as far as using that term, do you agree that it's good to use that term?
Yeah, I could talk a little bit about that. I think that word, a lot of the women that have, said that they experience this, it doesn't come from a place of the community not being supportive, but even though that is a factor, the main factor is realizing that you went to college, you got this job, and you're doing good at your job, and you just, you're advancing and you feel like you're an imposter because there's no way that you could be in this position. Maybe because you don't have other people in your life that have reached that place in their career, in their life. Your parents might not have. Maybe you're the first in your siblings to do that. And that's kind of what it's been, explained to me as. And I felt it too sometimes in my career when I first started. I didn't believe when they gave me my first offer letter. I was like, there's no way I got this job. Like it's a joke, like, because it's so unrealistic to my mind that I could be this engineer with this, prestigious organization and have a good stable career in my life for the first time. I don't know. I think they are two different things, and the reasons why you would feel imposter syndrome, it comes from mostly internally feeling like you, for some reason, don't belong there because you don't have the skills or qualifications. Even though you do, it's mostly like a self-confidence type of thing. And then the community aspect, I think, is separate. It might, I think, add to knowing that there's not a lot of other women in engineering that look like you, and feeling like there's a lot of mostly men in, in the classroom or in the workplace, I think that adds to it. But I don't think that's the main reason. I don't know. That's me though. I could be wrong.
That makes sense. Do you have some additional thoughts, Maritza?
Yeah, I think I agree with Amy. I think they're completely two separate topics here. You know, imposter syndrome comes within yourself, thoughts about yourself. And when it comes to, you know, also known as discrimination, if you're at work and, you know, your peers or upper management or the workplace is overall discriminating you just because you're a woman or a minority, then those are two completely separate topics that people might be experiencing, you know. So I think if you are in a workplace or an environment where they are not promoting you or giving you challenging projects for your experience and promotional opportunities, then I would consider that as being discriminated against rather than you having imposter syndrome about yourself.
Yeah, I agree with both of you 100%. And I can also tell you from experience that if I'm in a imposter syndrome mode and I'm in an environment that's some kind of way, those are tough situations. And I think that's why having a community, a positive and encouraging, supportive community of like-minded women in STEM is so critical, because you never know when those things are going to align. You're feeling that way, you're in an environment, and there's the compounded impact on you that day. It might take a bit longer to recover from it. But yeah, I definitely agree they're separate. All right, our next question is, I find myself being evaluated not only by my gender, but also by the clothing I wear, rather than by my knowledge, experience, skills, and abilities. What advice do you have to combat these tendencies?
Yeah, it's a hard one. Yeah, that's definitely a hard one. I think as women, we are viewed as our physical appearance. I'm not sure exactly why, but it's definitely something that I've also experienced in life overall. I would say just to be firm, you know, an advice that I would give to women is just to be firm and just keep repeating what you need, keep repeating what you want, keep having meetings with your management team, with your supervisor, remind them that you're here, that you're capable, and also advocating for yourself. They might not see you as a leader, but if you meet with them and you advocate for yourself and you let everybody know in the room what your experience, your education is, you know, then you have to be an advocate for yourself. You have to be the loud one for yourself in the room, because when it comes to that, people are not going to necessarily, you know, support you in that way if you are in an environment like that.
Yeah. Did you want to share anything additional, Amy?
Yeah, I agree with Maritza. You definitely have to be loud and get out there and advocate for yourself. I think there was something mentioned about, you know, the appearance, right? The clothing,
Mhm.
going to work. And I think I could touch a little bit on that. And I think the first question I would ask is, am I feeling like this inside my head? Do I feel like I'm specifically nervous, or do I know that my coworkers or my supervisors are going to perceive me in a certain way based off of me dressing in a specific way at work? And I've pretty much kind of, you know, noticed, like for me in my workplace, it's kind of like I wear what I would like to wear, casual, professional, and no one's ever said anything. But I know in other workplaces it's different. And my advice would just be to wear what you feel comfortable in, you know, and just go if you feel comfortable and you feel like it's natural for you to be wearing, you know, what you're wearing to work, then just rock it. Whether that's something feminine, whether it's more masculine, that's up to you. but as long as you feel comfortable in the clothing, I think you'd be able to kind of translate that energy through your work and just focus on, the work that you're doing when
Yeah,
your outfit isn't really like bothering you. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
being comfortable is important.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see here. What do you do to feel empowered or strengthen your resolve when your confidence is a bit lacking? Like what do you do to give yourself a confidence boost?
Mhm. I think in my experience, um, it's important for me to feel confident in order to be confident. So, in my perspective, I like to, dress what makes me comfortable and happy, and I like to remind myself of all my education, my experience, and then I also like to surround myself with confident women, with confident people, because the vibes of other people that you hang out with does you start adapting those same traits. So I like to keep my circle very with women that are confident within themselves, within their careers, because that rubs off on me, and that's what makes me confident.
Yeah, great answer. Amy, what about you?
Yeah, I agree with Maritza. I think having confident friends, when I don't feel the most confident, I just talk to them or I look up to them and I'm like, oh, yeah, I could do that too. Like I think just I had to actually learn that it's okay to be confident, mainly because a lot of confident women in male dominated careers are seen as bossy instead of just confident. So I think I just had to untrain my mind to learn that it's a good thing to be confident. It's okay. I'm allowed to be confident and, proud of my accomplishments and myself. And then when I don't feel confident, I just fake it. I'm just like, I'm just going to fake it until I make it. And then I usually make it and I'm like, see, I knew I could do it.
Yeah.
So that's what I do.
And I think it's important to understand that you can be confident and humble at the same time. You don't have to be an arrogant, confident person. You can be completely confident and be the most humble person at the same time. All
Yeah.
right, we're just about out of time. We've got time for just one more question. I'm going to read it out. It's clear that in addition to being co-founders, you're also great friends. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of that kind of connection and support system, and any advice you have for women who are looking for what you two have?
Mhm. I think, yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, me and Amy were great friends. I think it's very important to separate two different environments. When we are in business entrepreneur mode, we're on business entrepreneur mode, but also take that time to be friends, to go out to brunch, to go and talk topics outside of work, and keep watering that friendship. And when there is, if we don't agree on topics, to keep it professional, and also be respectful towards your co-founder, towards yourself, and just remember to always water that friendship because it'll blossom and grow.
All right, Amy.
Yeah, Maritza and I, we met in college and we were just study buddies. We were on the same geotech lab team. And then we started talking about our entrepreneurship goals, and that's kind of how we started Engineering Gals. So we always had that in common, on top of being women in engineering. But the more we kind of got to know each other, it was like, oh, wow, we're both first gen, we both have sisters. So naturally, I think that relatability was there. And then over the years, even though we have similar upbringings, our strengths are actually very different. So
Mhm.
in the way we run the company, whether it's like the finances, like one person will head that, and then another person will head, writing contracts or hosting events or maybe doing the marketing part of it. We
Mhm.
both go back and forth, and I think it's important to uh, value like the strengths that the other person has. And it's okay to like kind of go back and forth and rely on the person who has that strength. And yeah, and just like Maritza said, have that time outside of the business relationship to just hang out and have fun. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, any final advice, pieces of advice from you, Maritza, and then you, Amy, to our participants today before we end?
Yes, I think my advice is, you belong in this industry. You're as educated and as knowledgeable as all your peers, and just keep going. Keep sharing. I would highly recommend for everybody to share their career on social media, especially on Instagram, on TikTok. That's where the young generation is at. We need to be more vocal. We need more representation on all types of media. So if you have the courage to share your career and your personality on social media, please tag us on all your social media, because we like to share that and make sure that there's representation of women in engineering.
All right. And what about you, Amy? Final words to the participants.
Yeah, I think one thing that I learned was to create your own path, right? So whether that's your life, your engineering job or your career path or your entrepreneurship path, is that I spent a lot of my time looking at other people and what they did, and I was like, oh yeah, I could do that. I'll just follow what they did. That seems like a good foolproof plan, but it never ended up feeling like natural to me, or something that I wanted to do, or something that I was excited for. What I ended up being excited for was something that nobody else had done before. So when you do something that no one else has done before, it's really, really scary. And you're like, oh my God, I'm gonna look like this weird person out here doing something that nobody's ever done before. But that's what makes you unique, and that's what makes your path. So my advice is that it's okay to stick out and do something that somebody has never done before. And you create your own path by, uh, doing things that you're passionate about, one step at a time. And it's something that isn't like laid out for you. You just have to create it, by making decisions towards the things that make you happy. So yeah.
Excellent advice. Thank you so much. We're out of time, everyone. Please join us. Our next session, episode 4, will be on June 1st. Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.